The cold wind of Aberdeen swept across the Young Street Bridge, carrying the faint scent of river water mixed with damp wood. Kurt Cobain walked slowly, his shoulder-length, blonde hair damp from a drizzle that had settled over the town like a persistent shadow. He carried his worn acoustic guitar, the strings slightly rusted, yet the instrument still held the raw voice of his inner world. Fans would later imagine this bridge as a place of legend, but at that moment it was nothing more than a simple crossing over the Wishka River, a forgotten piece of his hometown that would eventually echo in the hearts of millions. Cobain paused at the edge, leaning slightly over the guardrail, eyes tracing the motion of water below. The bridge creaked softly beneath his weight, as if whispering secrets only he could hear. To any casual observer, it was a mundane structure, yet to Kurt, it symbolized something more, an intersection between isolation and expression, despair and creativity. He drew a deep breath, fog curling around his lips, and strummed a few tentative chords, the sound almost lost to the soft hum of the town. It was here that the first seeds of a song began to grow, a song that would eventually become Something in the Way. As he walked back toward his apartment, the city around him felt heavier, the shadows longer. Every alley, every street corner, whispered fragments of memory, fleeting glimpses of his childhood, arguments overheard, faces that had smiled and disappeared. These were the raw materials of Cobain's mind, messy and jagged, yet capable of being sculpted into music that felt both intimate and universally resonant. He jotted notes in a small notebook, barely legible, phrases that would later appear as lyrics. Underneath the bridge, tarp has sprung a leak, he scribbled, pausing, rereading the lines. To some, it might seem like an ordinary verse, yet there was an urgency in his handwriting, a pulse of something deeper, a confessional that existed somewhere between reality and imagination. Even as a teenager, Kurt had been attuned to the subtle cruelty and beauty of his surroundings. Aberdeen was a town of rain, of quiet streets and hidden corners, of a kind of melancholy that seeped into the bones of its inhabitants. Walking the bridge now, he felt both tethered and liberated by it. The structure itself became a metaphor, the crossing from isolation to expression, the fragile line between despair and creation. He had felt this before in smaller ways, strumming alone in a bedroom, hearing his own voice echo in empty rooms. But the bridge offered him something different, a canvas on which to place the full weight of his thoughts. Later that evening, Cobain sat with his guitar in the dim light of his apartment, the notebook open, the words staring back at him. He played the chords slowly, deliberately, letting each note hang in the air, as if testing its resonance with the world beyond his walls. The sound was raw, unpolished, yet painfully honest. He closed his eyes, feeling the vibrations through his chest, imagining a voice, his own, amplified and carried into a room filled with strangers. Somewhere in the distance, the faint roar of traffic mingled with the patter of rain on the roof. The city continued unaware of the song taking shape within these walls, unaware that a melody was being forged that would become an enduring emblem of human fragility and yearning. As the notes and lyrics intertwined, Cobain felt a strange duality, vulnerability wrapped in power. Each chord reflected his isolation, each line of lyric a glimpse into his private world. And yet, he could already sense the paradoxical beauty of it. The song would speak to others even before he knew its full meaning himself. The bridge, the river, the shadows of Aberdeen, they were all silent, witnesses to the birth of something intimate and eternal. It was not merely a song, it was a confession, a document of an inner landscape most people could never see. And then, a flicker of humor, almost imperceptible, crept into his mind. Even here, in the quiet desperation of his room, he imagined the reactions of listeners, the curiosity and surprise when they finally heard the words, when they felt the ache of isolation mingled with the raw hope embedded in the chords. What had begun as a simple exercise in melody and observation was transforming into something that might outlast the very town that birthed it. He strummed the final notes of the evening, a soft, almost whispering chord that lingered long after the last vibration faded. And for a moment, he allowed himself to smile, a quiet acknowledgement of creation in the midst of solitude. The morning light barely filtered through the blinds of Kurt Cobain's apartment. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and coffee, a subtle mixture of comfort and melancholy. He sat cross-legged on the floor, guitar across his lap, fingers tracing the familiar frets as if seeking the exact chord that could carry the weight of his thoughts. The bridge had left its mark on him, yet the song remained elusive, refusing to yield its full form. Each strum felt like reaching into a shadow, uncertain if he would pull anything tangible back. Cobain scribbled in his notebook again, lyrics forming in fragments, lines about water, leaks, and isolation that mirrored his own inner turbulence. But the words refused to feel complete. He paused frequently, leaning back, staring at the ceiling as if it could provide the missing piece. Aberdeen's overcast sky, the persistent drizzle, and the distant hum of the river outside became both companion and mirror to his mood. Each moment of silence in the apartment stretched, filled with the tension between the fragility of the lyrics and the raw honesty Cobain demanded from himself. As he experimented with chord progressions, Cobain's mind wandered to the extremes of human emotion he wanted to capture. He was aware that the song could not merely be a recounting of a place or an event. It had to resonate, carry something universal yet intensely personal. Every pluck of the string resonated in his chest, echoing the vulnerability and defiance within him. The song's rhythm emerged slowly, like water carving its path through stone, deliberate and unhurried, yet inexorably moving toward an inevitable form. Frustration crept in at times. The bridge imagery, so vivid in his mind, didn't always translate smoothly into melody. Cobain struck the strings harder, letting the sound reverberate against the walls, almost as if the echoes themselves could guide him to the right note. Sometimes he whispered lines to himself, testing their rhythm, listening for the moments when the lyrics would harmonize with the haunting resonance of the chords. There were moments of doubt, self-consciousness, that perhaps the song would be misunderstood, or that it would fail to capture the delicate balance between sorrow and subtle hope he sought. Despite the tension, Cobain also experienced flashes of clarity. A particular combination of minor chords felt exactly like the bridge's wooden planks, like the slight rocking beneath his feet, like the distant ripple of water beneath the fading morning light. He played it over and over, letting the repetition embed the emotion in every muscle, every nerve. Occasionally, a smile crept across his face, a fleeting acknowledgement that he was inching closer to something that might transcend mere words and chords, something that would speak to listeners long after he had moved past the moment. The solitary hours passed, with Cobain alternating between intense focus and quiet reflection. He occasionally glanced out the window at the fog-laden streets, imagining the townspeople going about their day, unaware of the musical tension brewing above them. Somewhere within that tension, he discovered a strange comfort, that the song could exist both as a private catharsis and a public statement. It could be raw yet precise, fragmented yet complete. He began humming softly, testing how his voice would convey the fragile intensity of the chords. Even in solitude, the song began to feel alive, almost as if it had its own will, guiding his fingers and voice to a place he had not yet consciously imagined. By afternoon, the first fully coherent draft began to emerge. Something in the way had taken its initial shape. The chords, the rhythm, the lyrics, all imperfect but charged with the quiet desperation Cobain sought to capture. The bridge remained central, not as a literal setting but as a metaphorical lens through which isolation, observation, and vulnerability could be felt. Cobain's heart beat faster as he realized the song was more than a simple composition. It was a living reflection of his internal landscape, a bridge between the personal and the universal, just as Yonge Street Bridge had bridged the waters of Aberdeen. Yet even as he strummed the final chord for the day, he knew the song was only beginning to reveal itself, that more work, more nuance, and more raw honesty were needed before it could truly exist in its full power. The fluorescent lights of the studio flickered faintly as Kurt Cobain entered, carrying his worn acoustic guitar like a talisman. The room smelled faintly of varnish, old wood, and the lingering scent of coffee cups abandoned by earlier musicians. A sense of anticipation hung thick in the air, heavier than any soundproofed wall could contain. Cobain placed the guitar gently on a worn stool, tuning each string meticulously, listening as the vibrations echoed softly across the room. Each note seemed to resonate not just in the studio, but within him, a conduit between his inner landscape and the space around him. As the recording session began, the first chords of Something in the Way filled the studio, fragile yet insistent. Krist Novoselic observed from the corner, silent, his bass resting idly, while the producer adjusted levels, careful not to disturb the delicate atmosphere. Cobain's fingers moved over the strings with measured precision, each strum imbued with the memory of the bridge, the rain, and the lingering shadows of Aberdeen. The song unfolded slowly, deliberately, every chord, every whispered lyric a testament to the balance between despair and subtle hope. The studio seemed to hold its breath with him, caught between the ordinary and the transcendent. During breaks, Cobain leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, reflecting on the imagery that had inspired the song. He spoke softly to the engineer, almost in a confessional tone, revealing glimpses of the metaphorical world he had created. "It's not just about the bridge," he murmured. "It's about everything I felt while walking through it. All the isolation and quiet observation. That's what I want people to feel when they hear it." His voice trembled slightly, betraying the vulnerability that always seemed to follow him. The room remained hushed, as if recognizing the gravity of the moment, aware that something profoundly personal was being shaped into music that could resonate far beyond its origins. Recording each take required patience, and the process was punctuated with moments of both frustration and revelation. Cobain's own expectations were exacting. A single misplaced chord or syllable could disrupt the delicate emotional equilibrium he sought. Sometimes he stopped mid-strum, tilting his head as if listening to echoes only he could perceive. At other times, a smile would flash across his face, a fleeting acknowledgement of alignment, of a sound or lyric that captured the precise tension between vulnerability and honesty. These subtle emotional shifts were almost imperceptible to the crew, yet they defined the essence of the performance. The most profound moments occurred during the first complete run-throughs. Cobain sang softly at first, testing the resonance of his voice against the sparse, fragile chords. Then, as confidence grew, the sound expanded, filling the studio without overwhelming it. Each note seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with the weight of the imagery it represented. The cold wind, the creaking wood, the isolation of Aberdeen, and the quiet reflection of a young man seeking meaning in both the ordinary and the profound. The producer later recalled that even seasoned engineers felt an unusual tension in the room, a mixture of awe, respect, and quiet reverence for the song's understated power. As the day progressed, Cobain experimented with subtle variations in tempo and dynamics, seeking the exact cadence that would convey both the fragility and intensity of his vision. Micro-adjustments to phrasing, slight alterations in chord voicing, and nuanced shifts in vocal emphasis all contributed to a final take that seemed almost preordained. When the last note faded, silence hung for a moment longer than expected. No one spoke. Even the hum of the studio equipment felt intrusive. In that silence, the magnitude of what had been captured became evident. The song was more than an arrangement of chords and lyrics. It was a distilled reflection of an inner journey, a bridge between isolation and expression, both literal and metaphorical. By evening, as the lights dimmed and the crew began to pack up, Cobain lingered, strumming softly to himself, the song still unfolding in his mind. Each repetition brought new insight, new nuance, a reminder that music was not merely performance, but a vessel for emotion, memory, and truth. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the window panes, carrying the faint scent of rain that mirrored the song's origin. Somewhere beneath the bridge, water continued to flow, indifferent yet eternal, just like the music Cobain had coaxed into life within these studio walls. The first time Kurt Cobain played Something in the Way for anyone outside the studio, the atmosphere was hushed, almost reverential. It was a small circle of trusted collaborators, Krist Novoselic, Dave Grohl, and a few close friends, who had witnessed the song's slow evolution from its initial sketches on the Young Street Bridge to the delicate chords now flowing from his guitar. Cobain's fingers moved over the strings with deliberate precision, and his voice carried a fragility that seemed to hang in the air, demanding attention yet not commanding it. The lyrics, soaked in metaphor, spoke of isolation, quiet observation, and a world viewed through a prism of personal struggle. Those listening felt it immediately. This was not a song meant to entertain, but to resonate on a deeper, almost unsettling level. As the final note lingered, silence followed, thick and unbroken. The crew exchanged glances, unsure how to react. The song was haunting, raw, and intimate, a stark departure from the more raucous energy typically associated with Nirvana. Cobain himself remained still for a moment, his eyes half closed, absorbing the impact of his own creation. There was a tension in the room, a mixture of admiration and uncertainty, as if everyone present sensed that they had just witnessed something that would leave a lasting imprint, yet could not fully articulate its significance. Word of the song spread cautiously at first. Studio engineers, friends, and bandmates began to discuss its subtle power in hushed tones. Critics would later describe it as one of the most emotionally affecting tracks on Nevermind, noting its stripped-down instrumentation and Cobain's haunting vocal delivery. Fans, upon hearing early snippets and bootlegs, experienced a mixture of fascination and disquiet. Many were captivated by the simplicity and honesty of the song, while others struggled with its understated, almost eerie mood. The emotional tension Cobain had meticulously cultivated resonated in ways that defied conventional expectations. Cobain's own perception of the song remained complex. He recognized its intensity and potential to connect with listeners, yet he remained wary of overexposure or misinterpretation. In private moments, he would replay the track, listening to the resonance of each chord, questioning whether it accurately conveyed the vulnerability he intended. It was a balancing act, the desire for honesty versus the fear of revealing too much. The song, in his mind, was a fragile artifact, a confession both personal and artistic, capable of evoking empathy without fully explaining the man behind it. Fans' reactions during early live performances were equally telling. When Cobain played Something in the Way on tour, audiences would fall silent, captivated by the intimacy of the moment. Unlike the explosive energy of other Nirvana tracks, this song commanded a different kind of attention, an emotional stillness that made every note and lyric feel consequential. Some listeners reportedly felt chills, others were moved to tears, while others simply sat in stunned appreciation, grappling with the raw authenticity emanating from the stage. In that quiet, Cobain's artistic vision achieved its fullest impact, a bridge between his internal struggles and the collective, emotional response of the audience. The juxtaposition of Cobain's frailty and the song's resonance created an almost paradoxical dynamic. While the lyrics depicted isolation and introspection, the very act of performing the song connected him to thousands of listeners, each interpreting the meaning through their own lens. The bridge metaphor extended beyond the literal imagery. It became a symbolic link between artist and audience, between private pain and public empathy. Every performance, every studio take, every whispered reaction contributed to a growing legend, cementing Something in the Way not just as a track on an album, but as an enduring emotional touchstone. Yet, even as the song gained recognition, Cobain remained introspective. In quiet moments, he reflected on the nature of its reception. Would listeners grasp the subtlety, the metaphor, the connection to the Young Street Bridge, or would they reduce it to a simple story of loneliness? The tension between interpretation and intention lingered, a reminder of the fragile line he walked as both creator and performer. And in that tension, the song's power thrived, leaving both artist and audience suspended between curiosity, admiration, and a quietly shared understanding of vulnerability. When Nevermind was released in September 1991, Something in the Way sat quietly at the album's end, almost like a secret waiting to be discovered. Unlike the high-energy anthems that preceded it, the song offered listeners a starkly intimate experience, a quiet descent into the fragile psyche of Kurt Cobain. Critics immediately noted its haunting simplicity, the bare acoustic chords, and the vulnerability of Cobain's voice, describing it as a moment of pure honesty amidst a whirlwind of grunge fury. Fans, both old and new, found themselves drawn to the song in ways that transcended mere musical appreciation. It became a personal reflection, a private doorway into the complex, emotional world of the artist they admired. The cultural impact was subtle but profound. Music magazines published analyses of the song's lyrical themes, drawing connections between the Young Street Bridge imagery, Cobain's adolescence, and the universal experience of isolation. Radio stations cautiously included the track in select segments, allowing it to breathe, giving listeners space to experience its nuances. And in living rooms, dorm rooms, and small clubs across the globe, the song resonated with anyone who had felt the quiet weight of solitude, reminding them that vulnerability could be a form of strength. Cobain himself observed the reception with a mixture of curiosity and guarded introspection. He understood that while the song connected with fans on an emotional level, many would never fully comprehend the metaphorical bridge, the delicate balance between imagination and lived experience. Yet, that ambiguity became part of the song's allure. It encouraged listeners to explore their own reflections, to see fragments of themselves in the echoes of his chords. The bridge was no longer just a piece of Aberdeen infrastructure. It had become a symbol, a conduit between artist and audience, isolation and shared understanding. Over time, something in the way took on additional layers of meaning. Fans visited the Yonge Street Bridge, some leaving notes, drawings, or guitar picks, honoring the place that had inspired a song that spoke to their own struggles. Online forums and fan letters filled with interpretations, memories, and personal connections to the song, forming a quiet, global community united by its emotional resonance. Cobain's intention had been to translate his internal experiences into music, and in doing so, he had inadvertently built a bridge between countless individuals seeking connection and solace. Even decades later, the song's influence persisted. Contemporary musicians cited it as a key inspiration for creating intimate, emotionally raw music. Documentaries explored the metaphorical and literal dimensions of the Yonge Street Bridge, emphasizing its role in shaping one of rock history's most enduring tracks. Critics continued to marvel at how Cobain could transform something so mundane, a simple bridge in a small Washington town, into an evocative masterpiece, a testament to human fragility and creative genius. Yet beneath all the recognition and analysis, the essence of the song remained personal, intimate. It was a window into a young man's psyche, a snapshot of vulnerability captured in melody and lyric. The quiet tension, the whispers of isolation, the haunting imagery of the bridge, these elements ensured that Something in the Way would never be merely background music. It demanded attention, reflection, and emotional participation. It connected the listener directly to the mind and heart of Kurt Cobain, long after the last chord faded. And so, the Yonge Street Bridge lived on, not just in wood and steel, not merely as a physical location, but in the echoes of a song that bridged solitude and shared humanity. Each strum, each lyric, each quiet breath in the recording carried the weight of a lifetime of observation and imagination. It became a testament to the power of art to transform personal pain into collective resonance, a reminder that even in isolation, a single voice can reach across time and space to touch countless lives. The bridge, the song, and the artist were forever intertwined, leaving an indelible mark on music history and on the hearts of those who had listened closely enough to hear not just the notes, but the truth beneath them.